noticed that Ben had put up an article this week, and it was kind of ironic because I just watched something on spiders being able to fly. It came across my YouTube feed. Didn't pay much attention to it, but Ben had highlighted the article that really shows the mechanics involved in this, and it has to do with the electric field. So a spider will cast off a little web netting and cast off into the air and start flight by catching a current, so to speak.
Continuing the July 8th edition of The Electric View, we are joined by Trevor and Buddy as we begin to discuss how insects fly, the nature of evolution on our electric sphere, and why some theories are not even theories. Please like and subscribe below.
So they even have a feeler, like an antenna, where they sense the field, the electric field, by putting like a finger up in the air like a human would. They put one of their arms up and test to see if it's capable for them to take flight. And if it is, they shoot off a little webbing and take off. So a scientist has done some advanced research in a controlled environment with this. I thought it was fascinating, but it brought to mind another individual, Gremenkov, I think was his name, from Russia, that did some experiments with particular insect bodies and wings and parts that seem to react in a magnetic field to the changes and can propel themselves and move pretty quickly, and so much they developed a platform and using these wings of a certain type of beetle that has this reaction, was able to levitate the platform even standing on the platform. So he did that research.
Okay.
I watched this. I totally saw the guy.
Yeah, it's just fascinating.
I saw that. I watched this before, the guy with the beetle wings, and he put them on this thing. And
yeah. He came across. Yeah.
Like at the micro scale of the little bitty fibers on the ends of the surface of the beetle wings.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's key to it. When you look at it under a microscope, you can see that there's something very advanced about the structure and the design of these that allows them to do what they're doing. And it may be that insects with this capability aren't really flying, but they're levitating through the electric field and actually utilizing the electric field in a way very similar to what I see in Tesla's work, where he envisions flight is just utilizing the natural currents, the ambient currents that are already there and present, just kind of tapping into it. And I think we see that in nature with the insects. That was a great study and read. As you can see, that goes way back. He did that research. What was it, back in the 40s, I think, if not before that?
I'm not sure. I'll tell you, Tesla's description of flight, when he described it, was Star Trekian. It was that for that time, to describe how to move through, like, no, I'm going to connect it to the electric field of the Earth, and then I'm going to move off of it, and then I'm going to go to Mars, and I'm going to land on it. And that's how it's going to, that's how you get there. It has nothing to do with wind or, it's, the description of it was still potent to this day to think that someone would think of that, and it just shows what he was thinking about versus what, just a regular rocket today,
Right.
Did you
link
something?
A link there, for his work.
They were I think on this video, as I remember, they were showing this action of the. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, that's a great video.
Yeah.
It was a charged wing type of thing.
Right. But interesting, the most interesting part of it is that this is the living action,
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, this is nature at its finest.
Yeah.
If we could duplicate that type of pattern or design, I'm sure we could overcome gravity fairly easy as these insects do. And he has shown in his design with this platform we're seeing now. This thing's supposedly able to travel 1,000 miles an hour. And they're mounted on like a Venetian blind type setup, so you can use these controls.
Right. I
mean, it sounds like it would work. I would love to see this reproduced.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of potential here. If what we're seeing is literally, the true mechanics to this, we may have the key right here before us in the etymology. These insects hold the key.
Yeah.
Now I'm wondering about these shapes and so forth, and
right.
it's a curved dipolar thing, and yet it is creating an electric field naturally in its own structure.
Yeah, that's
apparently
what it's doing. That can interact.
You start thinking
type of magnetic field around it.
Well, clearly, yeah.
Well, that's how when it's been shown over and over and over that when bees are looking at flowers, when flowers are sending out a signature to attract the pollinators, it isn't just pheromone; it is a frequency charge, and it is brighter or more fragrant, more powerful. It's when they want to be attracted, but say it's something that can only be pollinated once. The flower, like a tulip, it's got one bloom on it as opposed to a hydrangea, which has many florets. So it will send out this signal when it's ready, when it realizes that there is another tulip around for it to be pollinated, and it will attract, and then the bumblebees can feel the difference in the charge and know that it's time to go pollinate that one and which other one it wants it to bring it to. And bumblebees aren't supposed to be able to fly because of their shape. It just doesn't make any sense physically that they should be able to lift and do these things. And it's like, how do these things coordinate? So are the plants sending signals to the bees also to help them fly? I mean, is it all part of the same frequency, or are they different? I mean, obviously they're different mechanisms, but how do they relate to one another? Because they seem really driven by these things. The charge differences, the surface underneath. My way out there.
My way out there.
I don't think the way that the
yeah, no, I agree.
And then that attractive force, or why would they build it in that particular shape? The frequency of home or the hive.
Yeah, I think it's all definitely related, and it may be related to that spectrum that we can't see visually with our eyes. As we know, bees tend to utilize the sunlight and see flowers in ultraviolet, and that's fascinating by itself to take a look at a flower under ultraviolet compared to what we see. Yeah. It looks very different to them and helps them to zoom in, target in on these, these flowers that they're looking for.
Did you see how it held charge? How those beetle wings held charge?
That is fascinating.
They hold them in little capacitors that they put between two hairs on the top. They show with the magnification, and then they're all spaced evenly from each other, creating a grid. So you have the whole quote unquote likes principle, because you have so many are allowed to be together, and those hairs would be therefore holding a potential charge between them at all times, and it would be, because of their size, it would be very hard to get rid of that charge, because you'd have to try to touch them on the inside of that shell to make them lose their charge. And this is what's holding their charge the whole time. And of course, it goes to a point. I wonder if it's more concentrated on one side or not, or whatever. But sorry, it just blew me away, because as someone who studies electricity, that's how that would be doing it. It's not magic. It's just I had no idea there was something going on, like little hairs on the inside of a shell. Why would there be little hairs on the inside of a shell?
Right. It makes me think of horns and antlers on deer. Are they some form of antenna that they're utilizing in some form? I mean, these are calcium based. I would imagine in our bodies, calcium ions, bonds, really critical component of the electric body. Even in our fingernails and hair, it seems to be the point of discharge. We're like on a battery terminal. This very similar substance, what we find in our nails, is a form of corrosion on those terminals. And could that be what hair is a result of, and fingernails is from the electric charge itself discharging at those points? And it's kind of weird that we have hair at all these different discharge points on our body, especially the pubic region, kind of following these points where the electricity could flow out of the body.
Mm-hmm. Well, only if you're pissing on an electric fence, maybe.
But then when the out of feet hurt you too, I would think, in your feet and palms.
Yeah.
I like that idea of grounding.
Kidney 1, too, where kidney 1 is located in that meridian point is so crucial. That's every step. That's the first point of contact for this type of current. I mean, it's not the high voltage stuff by any means, Neil, that we would see on a power line, but more of this impulse type current that's very low voltage that can be induced to high voltage.
Oh, I'm positive that there's current that flows through every tree, and I assume that we as human beings respond well to, being on a beach and being grounded and so forth. I see that there's some merit to that line of thinking. So,
yeah, definitely.
I don't know exactly how much of one, though. I mean, some people swear by it, but then again, people do all sorts of weird things, so I don't know where to go yet. So,
well, I like James Oshman's work on this because he's shown some scientific relevance to this idea of reducing inflammation, headaches, different
that's
issues
the part I like.
To the flow. Yeah, he makes a good point. Yeah.
And Dr. Gerald Pollack was talking about the same thing about grounding out where you have swelling, type of thing. And I was like, oh, I never thought of that.
Yeah, that's long. James Oshman's work. He gave a presentation, I think it was 2012 or 2013 at the EU.
Oh, maybe I missed it.
That was a great presentation on grounding and earth bonding. And it makes a lot of sense. These ions have to go somewhere. And in our body, antioxidants and, free radicals are real similar to, electrons. And what we're seeing here may be an electron and just a imbalance in our electric body, creating the inflammation. So the idea is the ions are acting as nature's antioxidants and helping to replace those missing electrons and stabilizing the free radicals in the body.
I see what you're saying, yeah. Well, I mean, getting rid of being able to do something with, like, be able to just purifying alone in that whole area of the idea of electrically structured water is one thing, but then to see other mechanisms of self-correction in just water is interesting, to say the least.
Yeah, I love the topic of water. I think when it comes down to it, that water is going to be a very critical component in understanding how everything is really working, and that it plays such a key role. Even in the first books of the Bible, how water comes into play. And in physics, we understand this connection between light and water, and it's just fascinating to me. We may be swimming in an ocean of water, just in a different phase. That's what our solar system is a bubble of hydrogen, other gases as well as the noble gases.
Start thinking of it as kind of the blood of the earth. It's actually living, and it's got all these qualities. All the stages that it goes through, the different states, and then this holographic nature of it too that starts bubbling up a bit. It's pretty fascinating. Think about it, the whole earth is pulsing with the water beating, kind of like a heart as the tides go in. Right. And then the heart, earth, as far as the etymology of that's pretty interesting.
Yeah. How sound travels through water, of course, we have to put that in there. Mm-hmm. And just so many fascinating points you could go off to in that with water itself.
Right. The Schauberger stuff, which I'm sure you're familiar with, is just, that was very inspirational to me too.
Oh yeah.
Juice flowing as far as there's something going on here. That was kind of the doorway that said you got to go this direction. Yeah. What was the up, and then you get and then all the vortex stuff that comes out of that, and then the centripetal implosive sonoluminescence that bubbles out of that. It's like, gotta go. There's no question.
Yeah, and I think these insect wings are going to be along that same, concept or rabbit hole or whatever you want to call it. Mm-hmm. Once you start thinking about this makes a lot of sense. Man tends to duplicate technology based on what nature does. So some of our greatest advancements, and even just the cling saran wrap type paper now, how they re-instrumented it to have a texture that of a gecko's foot. And that stuff's amazing on a plastic bowl or a glass bowl, how it clings really nice to the bowl.
Mm-hmm.
And I think little stuff like that is amazing, and I definitely think this is the age of man that we're going to learn all this stuff, and we are now. We're seeing
this is the message that's coming
it's
through.
All
electric.
It's
coming.
It wouldn't surprise
It's coming
me.
through collectively. It's really interesting, and
I mean,
we're in a very interesting place on it, but it's certainly a profound thing.
You could do the exact same thing as putting a little tiny bunch of hairs, like almost microscopic hairs, right along the fuselage of the underside of a wing of an aircraft. And wind going over it alone would generate enough charge to charge them up if you made it the right material. And they would spread and hold a charge, just a simple capacitance charge, but it would be covering that whole underside of that wing. And if that was a repulsion to the general overall negative effect of the ground, then it should create lift. Just because we know the Earth is generally negatively charged. I don't think it would make lift immediately if it was so close to it, but it might. I don't know, because it's not charged. You know what I mean? But I don't know, because you wouldn't want to land it while charged. There's a lot of things you wouldn't want to do. But at height, I think it would be easy to reduce the overall drag of the craft by a certain percentage. It's not wanting to fall as fast, the type of thing. These would all be beneficial to maintaining flight, more efficiently. I could picture it. As you said, just reverse engineering something as simple as the hairs on a beetle's wing.
Right. You look down, this is where all this stuff with all the crap that I hand Buddy, it's like he's pointing at something, and it's like this was my intro through Jim, ultimately to this thing. This was the vetting that I got in order to get to the conference last year, right, Jim? Are you still there?
Yep.
Yeah. So if you extend this, just down into consider this a fundamental, this frequency, but you keep on extending it down as like a rising series of harmonics down into the waves that are going to fit onto here down into that vanishing point. Your frequency goes to infinity, and your energy goes to infinity. And that's why that line right at the center is so powerful, And it's like, that's implosion. And then it syncs with Planck's constant too. This is a fascinating part of it. And it's not to me, it started yelling at me, unexpectedly after, I went through that whole thing with looking at it in detail that I'd never looked at before, but they were all pointing at the same thing. and you start applying this, everything has been radiated. We've modeled everything from a radiative standpoint, radiation, and it's like that's only half the picture. So there's the other half that you're missing, and the other half is the one that makes life happen in an organization. It's the opposite of entropy.
That curve sort of reminds me of the same curve for the Birkeland current's overall distance versus strength.
Right. You care to elaborate, Jim?
Which part?
I don't know.
Which part?
This is.
I see Dr. Scott's sneak peek at the VU here.
Yeah. Well, this is where it came.
Yeah.
And I mean, the interesting thing was, it was just like, for me, it was like the imperative was like, you got to get to the electric universe and like see if you can get the VU there. And Gene presented me to Jim and his model, and then this is where this is the rabbit hole ultimately.
Okay.
So I mean, as far as filaments within filaments, the big filament is this. So. Right, Chet? Right, the local interstellar cloud.
Right. Yeah.
So, and then you start thinking, okay, how does this relate to what we're talking about with the insects? Because I think it does.
I can't tell.
It does too.
I got nothing.
I got nothing.
I got nothing on that. Yeah.
I think there's a big correlation here, and it's the way electromagnetic energy moves in this spiraling motion. And we see it down to the fine details, like when we look at those beetle wings underneath the microscope, you can really see that they're creating little vortices. These vortices kind of like reminding us spicules on the sun. Just they're much closer around the sun, creating all these magnetic poles. Mm-hmm. And we see magnetic tendencies in nature outside just the mineral itself, different minerals and rocks being magnetic, as well as metals. We see within the human body and biology, it plays a critical role. And I like how Heather was summing it up, or summarizing it with the bees and how trying to really pull all this together. That these insects, they hold the key to really understanding a lot of this and realizing that these spiders, they can fly like this, utilizing these currents. It makes you wonder, they can spread across the face of the earth pretty quickly if they can catch those currents. And I remember some early research that was doing on the upper atmosphere and just the abundance of life that they found up there, especially these insects, and how the heck did they get up there? Well, to me, it's starting to make a lot more sense. There's a whole ecosystem in the upper atmosphere, these different types of creatures. Mm-hmm. And this may be the means of how they got up there. And some insects will go to those altitudes and breed. That'll be their main breeding ground, then come back down to the earth. So there's a lot of potential out there in the electric field and a lot of capabilities within even the insects make up themselves that we have to learn from.
Very cool.
The way the bees and the birds see too, there's a visual aspect to this light that I think we're just starting to scratch the surface in our different means of looking at these. For instance, the Hubble Space mission to photograph these in different spectrum has really put a new light in the way we see galaxies and the material that's there. As well down to Earth here, if we take that, look at an ultraviolet and see the flowers like I mentioned earlier, and Heather was mentioning, it just opens up a whole new world of potential.
Mm-hmm. Makes me think of that song, and the birds and the bees.
Yeah, they hold a key.
Exactly, because there's like this different
It's
element.
all about sex. Yeah.
Hey, well, then we go back to the Hermetic principles, right? But
yeah, right, exactly. See, yeah, that's exactly right. There's the center where there's still center.
Mm-hmm. That's right. The polarization, the movement back and forth, and this whole world that in which we exist that we can't see, but we can acknowledge the effects of. There's been a lot of talk of late about science versus philosophy and how science needs math and math needs science, and they kind of decide there's this thing, and then they make math to go with it, and they say, I made math that goes with it, and so this thing has to be. And then other people are like, but the philosophers, they're like, oh, but this is, and yet it doesn't fit in your math, and so then there has to be this whole exploration and application of numbers to verify that something exists when we can see that it exists, even though we don't apply numbers to it, and allowing it to be the thing that it is, free of the constraints of math and free of the constraints of the laws, quote, laws that we've created to constitute reality for ourselves, as opposed to looking at things and saying that is real as shit. That is so real. That's happening right now. And there's an effect going on, and we can see what it is, and just allowing ourselves to learn from the observation of it and know that everything is unique and their variables are so vast and changing that it's really confining to us in our understanding to say, well, this doesn't fit into this equation. It isn't real. It doesn't exist. That's this whole topic that I've been seeing all over everywhere is science and philosophy versus science and philosophy, and then how do they equate? Pardon the pun, but intended.
Yeah, I think you need that natural philosophical aspect. Like Walt has stated so many times over, without it, we can't really prove the fundamentals and the practices through scientific research without thinking that first. And really, as humans, we think and then we create. So creation really starts in the thought process. And that's where natural philosophy is so crucial to the sciences, because really to understand this stuff, we have to think about it and then prove it, try it. And then we can say that it's natural law after it's been verified. But it's a process.
The amazing, to me, loud hypocrisy is that the current environment within academic science, and particularly how it's presented in the media, which is the big collective, is that it's open and it's the authority and it's good. It's almost religious, and then you begin to wake up to the fact on how authoritarian and dogmatic it is, and ultimately that it's standing on a house of cards, and it's like that realization is just profound, and you have to all of a sudden it's a call to action for me, that it's that hypocritical.
Yes. Well, everything is a theory, right? The Big Bang Theory, the theory of evolution, like all of these things they openly say are theories and yet state them as fact. And then when you bring up other theories
actually some of them aren't even theories.
They're just ideas or hypotheses.
They're not even hypotheses. Like to be like you're not allowed to propose the Big Bang, like in science. Mm-hmm. You're not allowed to propose that because it needs to be testable and falsifiable, and it isn't. It's just a belief. There's no.
Right, that's a good point. Yeah.
And you can't. There's the other one that you were just mentioning, declaring a law. Well, sure, it can be a law. Only, but as long as we acknowledge its scope, like it's a law apparently on Earth, like the law of gravity, like we haven't tested it off Earth, but we extrapolated throughout the universe and created a religion around it almost, and that's
I
hardly
like
scientific.
Sheldrick's take on that with it's like what natural process has to have a legal system associated with it?
That's good.
Law, right?
But that comes to our rational. We need to be able to put things into rational perspective, rational numbers. There's rational, instead of like saying that some things aren't rational and that still exist.
Right.
Right. And I think that's where we need to remain open-minded with these things too. That to a certain extent we can prove what we call natural law through, these rules that we've made, and math helps to explain those basic rules. And the electric universe doesn't change physics by any means. It's actually showing where the errors are in current understanding in physics and adds to it. Like, for example, Newton's second law of motion. By adding the spiraling velocity factor to this, now we can understand electrodynamics through Eric Lathway's work, and we have the high lift rail system thanks to doing those additional equations and adding to the formula that already works. I mean, we show that it works, but there are always dynamics outside, and natural law doesn't necessarily have to be something you look at as set in solid stone. It's just a basis of understanding for physicists to understand the basic principles of how things are working. And if those principles are wrong, they need to be corrected so that we're not teaching wrong principles.
Would it be if they were called principles instead of being called laws? Because called law means that it's like set in stone and there's a judiciary committee associated with them to decide.
Oh my God, you're so right. You are so right on the major problem.
You can break into some serious discussions on why we call things the way we do. But, overall in society, these are helping us to understand the terminology. We may misapply it in some verse or another, but natural law is meant to be pretty sound. I mean, the sun does what it does, and we consider that natural law for it to rise in the east and set in the west, but will it always rise in the east and set in the west? We can't say that's for certain at all. In a longer period of time, it may be like the legend and lore of this world has stated in its cultures that it may reverse direction. It says it's done it 3 times already, so we need to reverse back to our original position because we're still out of sync. It should rise from the west according to the Hopi.
Right.
Now, we'll eventually learn that through law. I'm sure we could keep our testimony and, sound doctrine like the traditions of men are trying to do here now through time, storage of books and different files. At some point, we're going to go through a catastrophe. We're all catastrophism.
What's your read on the Hopi? I've been looking at that, perusing.
There's a very interesting correlation with the Hopi and the Sumerian and their language text. So the Hopi may actually be the ancient Hebrew that migrated west through China. At some point, went underground, came up what is now the Grand Canyon. According to their legend,
the states they came by sea.
Yeah, or they could have went on top.
And they occupied that whole area. So.
However, there may be something to some underground passages, some caverns, some means for moving underground, even possibly underneath the entire Pacific Basin. And that's what the Hopi are stating. They were actually underground, and when they came out from underground, they were basically in China, and then they come up in the Grand Canyon. Now this passage is sealed. It's part of the Hopi's sacred ground to the south of the Grand Canyon. Southwest lays this region, and it's riddled with petroglyphs that are ancient in origin. This didn't happen in recent times by any means. And I believe the Hopi have been here for quite a while because their dialect is matching an ancient Sumerian dialect and an ancient Hebrew dialect. Wow. And the terms that they're using are these same names for the gods and the terms. It matches so nicely. Yeah. But there's a correlation there of some sort. And their blue Kachina and red Kachina kind of aligns with some Nibiru story in Jupiter, some catastrophe that happened a long time ago with those planets.
Well, they're calling for it, and I mean, from what I've picked up, it's like it's in the near future.
Hey!
Hey!
The blue kachina. Speaking of the blue kachina.
Blue kachina. What's that?
Lost camper.
Oh, that's epic. I think we
Buddy,
just hit 420.
Buddy, you there? 420, yeah. Buddy, you there?
What's
I
That
just
felt like a 420 moment.
Are you there?
Yes, I am.
It's
All right.
actually 4:18.
We just gave a great introduction to you, the blue kachina.
The blue kachina.
What's the blue katina?
You, obviously.
It's you.
That's what it is.
Oh,
Here, I'll show
Apparently,
you.
it has to do with Hopi Indians as well.
Hopi. We're talking about Hopi Indians and their relations to the Sumerians and the ancient Hebrews. So.
okay.
Yeah, another fascinating thing the Hopi mentions too is that the moon draws closer to the earth, and the earth draws closer to the sun, which is also mentioned in Revelation towards the end of the days and the end of the ages. You tend to end with some type of reversal that may take place in this movement. And it's believed in their lore and legend, too, that there was another moon that collided into the Earth and was actually absorbed by the Earth. A second moon, which I thought was fascinating. But this current moon in Hopi legend wasn't always here either. It's a newer body that's added in their legend. They talk about how they come topside, and it's still hard to see through the clouds with all the thick concentration of atmospheric gases that are taking place. The sun is visible, but there's nothing to give the night. It's like, and all of a sudden now the moon is visible. So it wasn't there before they went underground this long period of time, but when they come back up, they find the sun in the sky. They also find the moon's there now to rule the night. And they have a little story about how the moon was created as well. And in Mexico, we have a lore of a name and etymology. If you go back to the original tongues, Mexico means the navel of the moon. So if this is the navel of the moon, was there some umbilical cord extending out from Mexico to the moon in an electrical tethered connection? And that's where it draws its name, Mexico. But,
wow.
Some different traditions from the land of Mu that have to do with the moon being birthed from the earth. Some type of fission process that would fission off this other body. And it might be a possibility as well that the moon could have been birthed from the earth, and they saw the birthing process and maybe even witnessed that catastrophe and the umbilical cord that extended between the two.
Yeah. Very cool.
It's interesting when you get into mythology. There's a lot of different, rabbit holes here, and there may have been entire ages of men and a type of man, a prototype man that existed before our current form. It's very possible that we've went through an evolutionary process that's taken millions of years, and that's why we see so many artifacts and details of great civilization that once lived. And then you really get into the mystic stuff, like what's her name? Helen Black. I can't pronounce her name.
Blavatsky.
Blavatsky.
Yeah.
Has some interesting stuff in her readings too. For being a woman in the late 1800s,
amazing.
Composed as many pieces of literature as she did. Only comparable by like Ellen G. White, the Prophecy of the Seventh Adventist Church. There's very few women that are allowed to write and produce, and these two produce a lot of literature and very prophetic stuff. It almost makes me think, because a lot of their works later deemed to be plagiarism, that they had taken all their work from other scriptures and was comprising in a new book to be related, and that this is actually some very ancient knowledge, and it does correlate nicely with some of the other mythologies. So. But you talk about the Hopi, and that's one of my, favorite, along with the Aboriginal Indians of Australia.
Love to do it. Just show, quote unquote, just specifically focused on that, because I don't know much. I know enough that it's super intriguing. So.
It is, and Saturn mythology has always been one of my things. I related closely with Talbot and his work. I've had discussions with him, interviewed him on my show in the past, and I love his work. We sat down, had dinner at conferences in the past, and I talked to him about different things, issues that I had with his theory, and we have civilly discussed this in the past, that there are points, even in his theory, that leave some need for future explanation. And he left it be known, that it's not an end-all, be-all by his work. He just wants to keep this work alive, and the thought and the idea and the concept that there is something behind this. And regardless if it's exactly the way that he's portrayed it or not, it's something that we need to look at as a possible cause for catastrophism. And what this human race has been through in its history. So it has a lot to tell us that we can learn from.
Right.
I agree.
I mean, they saw this whole, the Western invasion of their land, etc. But it's like, part of the prophecy, from my understanding, is this will pass. This is, and we're on the cusp of it. So.
We always pass, we always survive, and the group of survivors this next time may be the sixth generation of humans to conquer the face of the earth. And what it looks like to me and Helen's work, like what she stated, the Austro-American is going to inherit this next race, because what you have is a small group of individuals held up in safe spots throughout the earth. That if there was some great destruction, being man-made or nuclear or outer space, something comes in, whatever it is that causes the catastrophe, a super flare, whatever that is, it will come, it will pass, and there will be survivors to go on and inhabit, the new world. And we kind of see a lot of symbols pointing towards that. The elite don't necessarily hide all this stuff. You can read stuff like the New Yorker and see the symbolism. If you're familiar with cryptology and symbolism, you'll understand that there's a picture there that's worth 2,000 words.
Right.
Okay. So you start reading that picture, not with vocal words, but with understanding what the symbols mean, and you can see the pictures clearly painted on the wall.
Yep. Yeah. So it's that hiding in plain sight. So.
Right. And there's nothing anybody can do about it. That tells you that they're not trying to stop anything or prevent anything or save anybody. There's going to be a preservation of seeds of the earth and the animals of the earth, like Noah's Ark. The days come. The days of the catastrophe, there's always preparation. It takes place years in advance. And we see those preparations being made. But is it anything to fear? Yeah, I would love to see a world that's all melted races in one race, so there's no more racism. That a black person, a white person are all Aryans. All the races in this fifth generation are Aryans. To say it's just white race is an Aryan, that's a lot. We're all from the same race of Aryans. We share the same blood. A third generation black person can produce a white person. It's been shown. We're all the same. And if we unite in one beautiful tan-colored race with all these different wonderful eye colors that we have, I think that would be the most beautiful thing we could see for a sixth generation, the sixth race of men. The melting pot of all.
You want to just date a Brazilian, don't you?
Yeah. Well, I think everybody does. And white people, with the RH defect have defects. But so do black people with sickle cell. And there's all these problems from becoming isolated into just our individual races that we are due to our regions where we've maintained for so long. And that's causing a problem in our DNA. It's causing a bottleneck in itself that it self-destructs cancer and all kinds of problems.
I'll go a further step, because I think animals as well, and it's like all and you can go to the extent where it's like everything has this living quality. So it's all material. Everything that you're exposed to is the same.
Everything goes through changes with these catastrophes.
Everything is in movement.
Yeah, we move, we're evolving,
and
we're changing.
Yeah. So I mean, I think the central focus on anthropocentric, I guess, to try to get the word out properly. Anthropocentrism, I guess, something like that. But focus on us. It's very limited because I think it's all motion, everything around, and we're seeking that lowest energy configuration, which is that stillness, timelessness of eternity.
Yeah, I think we're right on process though for our evolution. There's checks and balances to everything, and we're getting ready to get that balance.
It feels like
check
it, doesn't
and
it?
balance.
You kind of feel it. Yeah, I feel it.